you can go longer without food than you can without sleep. So after losing sleep and you get into that 24 hours, you hallucinate so bad, your brain actually starts to break itself down. World peace will be solved with everyone sleeping better.
When you're sleep deprived, you're vulnerable to injury, partly because your reaction time, like just the way you plant your foot or the way you see the ball coming at you in the example of baseball. And quite often, whenever you find out why a player, when you get into the weeds a little bit, when I find out why a player is sort of in a slump, a lot of it has to do with fatigue. Fatigue is a big deal.
So if you're not getting deep sleep, which is tied to those colder temperatures and generally happens in the first half of the night, you are not getting good quality sleep and you are not doing any of those processes, which are really important for longevity and health span. Us humans do have a prefrontal cortex, and stress is by far the biggest enemy of sleep out there.
Hey, everybody. It is I, and it is Terry Youngblood. And I get excited about a lot of different folks, you know what I mean? And I am really excited to have this conversation with Tara and all of you. And I'm just going to give you a short little blip about who she is and what we're going to kind of discuss today. And then one of the reasons why I'm super excited is because proper sleep, consistent proper sleep is my nemesis. And I think I do a lot of, we were talking briefly before everybody got here, but and I just learned something from you, and we'll talk about that as well. But yeah, so this is really, really important. And there's hydration, and there's fitness, and there's nutrition, and there's people just sort of take sleep for granted, and even if it's bad, they go, whatever, that's the best I can do. And but there's you're going to give us some amazing tips on how to sleep better and the benefits from doing that. So I'm fired up. So let me just read this short little blurb right here, all about you. Ladies and gentlemen, Tara Youngblood is a certified sleep scientist with a science background in fitness and wellness, and she is the CEO and co-founder of Chilisleep. Now, her sleep tips will work for anyone looking to take up simple lifestyle challenges to optimize their sleep, no matter their age, their background, or stage of life. And I've already written down some of my questions.
Awesome. So, well, fire away.
I'm trying. Well, I figured I'll just tell us a little bit about kind of how, where you studied and what your background is and kind of who you work with and how this kind of became sort of your life work. It's a very interesting category, a very essential and needed category for people. If you're people, you're gonna need this. So take it away.
Yeah. So, my background actually is in nuclear physics and fusion, where I started, which has nothing to do with sleep whatsoever. But my husband and I met in school, and we started coming up with products. His uncle invented the waterbed, and
uncle invented the waterbed.
the waterbed, Charles P. Hall. He's quite a character. It was like just over 50 years ago now.
Is he still alive? Is he still alive?
He is. Actually, he just got remarried. We were in Seattle for his wedding on Bainbridge not that long ago. He is quite a character. Very groovy, still very groovy.
Oh man. Yeah. Back in the 70s when I went to college, there were a lot of, and you weren't supposed to have them in dorm rooms because something happened. Gosh. But man, a lot of kids that I went to school with had them.
Yeah, he still sleeps on. There's new versions out.
Right.
But yes. So I kind of started the, product development. But I have never been a great sleeper either. I know you talked about that. And in all honesty, we had a sort of a traumatic event in our family, and I stopped sleeping. I got depressed, and mental health and sleep anxiety are all very tied together. I'm sure we'll talk about sort of stress and its role in sleep, but I pretty much stopped sleeping. If you totally stop sleeping, you die. So it wasn't totally done, but as close to that as still surviving. And so it was really digging myself out of that well that forced me to learn everything I could learn about sleep. The perk of that is that it's not tied, my background isn't tied to just neuroscience or just psychology. Both of those disciplines approach sleep very different. Your primary care physician is another sort of approach. Chinese traditional medicine, Ayurvedic medicine also have different traditions on how to challenge and fix sleep. And so I feel like my perk is that as a sleep coach, I don't have to sort of have one guideline or one methodology. I kind of came up with, not that different than how you did with your P90X, a different framework to approach sleep And that framework kind of breaks it down into basic pillars and what are the elements you need to have. And we talked about at the beginning of, does it have to be time? Does it have to be a certain amount of time and going to bed at a certain time? Those can help. You can use that as your pillar. But just like you have framework in yours, there's elements that are variables and there's elements that you have to have some piece or part of it. And that's really where I got started on sleep. And today I coach all different kinds of people, as you mentioned, from regular, whoever pops on in the group sometimes, to, professional athletes like the Cincinnati Reds. I'm their head sleep coach.
That is cool. That's a cool gig. Wow.
Yeah,
Awesome.
It's kind of fun. I get to put baseball players to sleep.
And so that they can be very awake while they're trying to swing at 100-mile-an-hour fastballs.
Yes, actually, it allows them to have less injuries. Like you talked about, what is a benefit of sleeping better beyond sort of the longevity and overall health for athletes or anyone that is working on fitness. You'll actually have less injuries. It's, when you don't sleep, it's really the equivalent of being drunk in some form. And so you imagine even something you've done 1,000 times when you're tired, you just don't do it as well, the same as if you were getting drunk first. So the injuries that happen in your body because of all the other systems that are tied to it are significantly more for anybody that does athletes, not just professional ones. But obviously when your gig is playing ball, you need to keep doing that.
Well, if you look at a lot of the people that are in this group who are listening in, they're all doing one of my programs. A lot of them are doing something called the Power of 4 right now. And others are doing P90X3 or P90X. And, it's so funny when you think about it, like what you said is so simple. And I think everybody's heard it 100 times, is that when you're sleep deprived, you're vulnerable to injury partly because your reaction time to light, like just the way you plant your foot or the way in which you speed, the way you see the ball coming at you in the example of baseball. Or in football, just your ability to be able to see the ball in, or be able to see the whole field if you're a quarterback, or if you're a hockey player, the way that moves. And quite often, whenever you find out why a player, when you get into the weeds a little bit, when I find out why a player is sort of in a slump or has a bad game, a lot of it has to do with fatigue. You know what I mean? He's like, oh, really? I thought he's just in a bad mood today, or whatever. Who knows? But yeah, fatigue is a big deal, and I think a lot of people. And then I'll let you get into your more science about it. But a lot of people, they try like hell to try to get some decent sleep, and they just go to bed with their eyes wide open, their brain's going crazy, and even if they're trying to get 8 hours like they think they're supposed to, and I know that you're going to talk about different things like taking deep breaths or meditation, or the temperature in the room is a big deal. Like I wrote a book called The Big Picture, and I talk a lot about what my bedroom looks like, my mattress and my pillow and my sheets and no electronics in there and pitch black. I mean, that's my thing. A lot of people like a little ambient noise. That's, for me, it's like, I would live in a cave in the center of the earth. That's the quietest place.
Honestly, caveman had it right. So living in a cave is not that wrong. So, I think that's a great segue into, how does sleep work? And the first thing we need to know about sleep is, and if I give a talk and there's got to be a PowerPoint or a presentation, I show this really ugly little marine worm that's basically magnified, and it's a circle ball with little funny feelers all over it. And even with 700 million years of evolution, we still use the same melatonin regulation system as that marine worm. So when you start to think about what are the basics of sleep, sleep is really old. And so how our brain needs to function and how that mechanism works really is down to simplicity. But to your point, if you don't get it, it's really hard. So where I start is there's 3 pillars to sleep. One is environment, because that little worm doesn't have a brain. And as much as that feels amazing as you're laying in bed with your head spinning, it doesn't have a prefrontal cortex to spin. All it can do is respond to the light and the temperature change of the daily cycle. And that's where circadian rhythm is heavily entrained to that. It doesn't mean you can't hack it. Doesn't mean you can't work around that. And that's where we'll kind of talk about, does it have to be the same time? Does it have to be? You
can hack the circadian cycle.
Really? Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So the language of your brain when it comes to sleep is 100% the environment. So between light and temperature most succinctly, your brain registers it in a way that is different than how you even feel, but it's looking for a change of temperature. And so there's been studies out of UCLA, Jerry Siegel did, where they tracked hunter-gatherer tribes, back to that caveman for over a year. And they didn't go to sleep the second it got dark. They were looking for dimming lights and getting softer lights, but they're looking for a change of temperature. They didn't sleep 8 hours. It was 6 to 7. There were different sleep segments they often had. Siesta in lots of cultures of the world is definitely a thing.
Chilling during the day, yeah.
Yep. Early Europeans would sleep sort of late afternoon when they'd come in from the fields, and then wake up around 10 or 11. You still see this happening in Spain, and then be social until like 10 till 1, even in the morning. And so there's all these different profiles for circadian rhythm, and lots of different ways to sleep. We just, in our industrialized society, think it's easiest to kind of focus on 8 hours from 10 to 6. But for lots of us, that's not very predictable or easy. And it doesn't mean that has to be. You can actually tell your brain it's time to go to sleep using temperature and sound and light, and turn that into a ritual, and that can help you get to sleep. But that's the environmental pillar. There's also behaviors, which we'll talk about, like working out and things like that, what you eat. And then the other one is mindset, because us humans do have a prefrontal cortex, and stress is by far the biggest enemy of sleep out there, 100%. And although there are not too many lions, and I think you even talk about this in sort of different things, but stress today is very rarely truly a lion about to rip your arm off. But most of us live in this state of being prepared for it. So when our body's stressed out, we actually, all the systems kind of batten down the hatches and stop doing the healing and taking care of ourselves, because we're ready to have our arm ripped off. We're ready to do this. We're going to do this. And when you're ramped up all the time, you can't relax, you can't unwind, and you certainly don't sleep very well.
Yeah, all true. Those are now, it's interesting. If you don't mind, and I'm kind of digressing here a little bit, I don't know if everybody knows what the circadian cycle is. And can you explain that to folks? And then B, you've touched upon it briefly about how different folks, different strokes have different cycles, and they can they don't need the 8, but sometimes they need 6 and 7 based on their lifestyle or culture or something. And then, can you kind of get into the weeds with that a little bit?
Yeah, so your circadian rhythm or cycle, there's lots of sort of different ways or terminology around it, but it's basically your body clock. And it's often tied to morning person or night owl or to sleep, but your clock is actually your clock. Just like your clock in your computer runs your day and manages that, your highest blood pressure, when you should have a bowel movement, when you should eat, sunshine, all of those things are all entrained to that clock. So there's a whole lot that is going on and telling you that clock. The power of knowing your circadian rhythm, or that profile for you, which is genetically driven, although you can influence it, like I said, on different routines and rituals. You can also know when you're at your cognitive best. So a morning person is definitely going to be ready to go in the morning. They're going to work out, have a better performance from a workout, or even just from work, email, producing something cognitively in the morning, and much more creative in that sort of late afternoon. Night owls are kind of the opposite. They kind of ramp up slower into their day. And so like sort of that late morning, early afternoon, they're going to be more creative as they start out, and then they're going to get more serious and better to do higher cognitive self later. They may even work into the evening because that feels good. And so it's also for them, they can also work out in the evening. But if as a morning person, you're working out before you want to go to bed, that's often in conflict. So it's where understanding what are those behaviors and how do they match with what you're trying to do. And obviously, the more you understand and get to that sort of what are your pillars that work for you, the more you can play around with those variables and kind of create that consistent. Easy sleep sounds crazy to someone that doesn't sleep, but it really can become that sort of predictable even when you travel or do other things. And that's where a lot of the athletes I work with, obviously different hotel rooms every night, it seems unpredictable, different schedules, different games at different times. But as babies, we learn how to sleep wherever and whenever. And if we can remember how to sleep as a baby and train ourselves with certain rituals and certain parts of sleep, that's where breathing, what you do, what you think about, what you listen to. You talked about light and sound being those consistent factors for you. You can take that on the road anywhere. And when you combine that with sort of other powerful triggers, you can create consistency wherever you go.
So here's a question for you. The circadian cycle for each individual, is that something that's inherently genetic? And if your job or your lifestyle doesn't allow it, if it's, let's say I'm naturally somebody who likes to stay up late and likes to sleep in a little bit, but my job forces me to get up at 5:30 every day. Can you, is it not genetic, or is it a little bit genetic, or sometimes you're just forced to make it happen? I guess, what do people do if, oh man, I wish I could just get up at 10 o'clock every morning, but I can't. I have to have this job where I got to get in traffic and work for the man. You just gotta, how do you figure that kind of stuff out so you get the best possible sleep?
So it is helpful to know what you're genetically predisposed to, right? So kind of like certain diets are going to work better with certain people. It doesn't mean that's the only food you can ever eat. It just means that certain foods and certain macros are going to work better for you. Even certain workouts are going to work for better body profiles than others. Circadian rhythm is like that. There's a genetic predisposition. It's a PR3 gene, and the length of that gene determines whether you are a night owl or morning person. You don't need a big genetic test to do that. You can take some quizzes and generally get to that. Most people have a general sense of like, oh yeah, you can answer a few questions and like, yeah, that's who I am. But just like I said, knowing that you're a certain way doesn't mean that's the only way you can function, but it does mean that you may have to make certain allowances because you are a night person. Just like if you were to pick up and move, you're on the West Coast and I'm on the East Coast. If I came out to visit you and I stayed there for more than 3 days, very likely my circadian rhythm, which is a morning person and I get up at 6 here, suddenly becomes different and it adapts to that time. So you're a fairly adaptable being to change that. What you need to do is sort of match those habits, knowing that 6 a.m. is really, for you as a night owl, is like 9 a.m. is really when you'd like to wake up, or 5 o'clock if you're on the road. Then you start to back into that of, the wake up time is really what you have to work around. So if I need to wake up at this time and I only have this long to sleep, so maybe it isn't a full 8 hours, which means maybe you need to do a nap. Maybe you need to sort of have that siesta when you get home. You can definitely work through those different parts. But if you think over a 24-hour period you're aiming, if you have to benchmark it to time, I'd rather benchmark it to quality. Time is a terrible variable. We talked about it. As a physicist, you never use time as a single variable because it's very subjective and variable. So you want to benchmark sort of 6 to 8 hours of giving yourself time to either relax and unwind or have downtime. And somewhere in that sort of range, you'll get good recovery. Some people may need more downtime. Even if it's less sleep, they may still need that downtime.
Are you talking about traveling from one coast to the other kind of a strategy? Is that?
Yeah. So you're sliding a scale. So you'd probably like to get up. If you're as a night person, you're going to look for that 9 a.m. sunshine is what's going to wake you up. So it also means that you're going to have to, at your 5 a.m. wake up, you should turn on all your lights. You should warm up your house warmer because your body's saying, okay, now it's sunshine, it's dawn, it's morning. You want to do everything you can to fast forward, picture the environment at 9 a.m. when you ideally like to wake up, and you make that environment as close to that at 5 a.m. as possible. And as you start to force that 5 o'clock wake up, just like it would happen naturally if I went over to the West Coast, it would be brighter at different times than it is here on the East Coast. And so if you duplicate that, you can start to change that circadian rhythm. You just need to make sure you make allowances on the other side of it as well. But that's sort of acknowledging that environmental killer as part of what do I need to do? And you should still be working out in that morning time frame. Everything you can do to trigger your body of I'm now up and moving will start to turn off sleep, because sleep is important. There's actually something called a sleep switch, which as someone that never slept well, does not sound like that's possible, that there's just a switch you can flip.
Tell me about the switch.
I know. It was actually discovered by Clifford Sapir out of Harvard in 2003. I think he's been holding out on us. But it's been in Nature magazine and like all sorts of things, but it's actually triggered by that change of temperature that we talked about. So when sleep wants to turn on, and you'll see it tied to circadian rhythm, the first half of a night is more predisposed to deep sleep sessions than REM sleep. And REM sleep will be the second half of the night because it likes a little bit warmer. Your brain is actually entrained to that environment to tell you what type of sleep you should be having when. And so that sleep switch is turned on when there's a change of temperature. And the range of that for people is slightly warming your feet can trigger a change in core body temperature. And some people, it's all the way to extreme, like a cold shower, really cold, will also help to trigger that sleep. And then on the other side is warming you up, just like the planet warms up in the morning. When you do that, you get a release of cortisol and it turns off sleep and you start marching back towards that sleep switch again. That circular part of it is really important to manage.
Is there a temperature range? Well, here's something. For me to sleep well, I set my temperature, my thermostat at 70. Now, a lot of people have, different parts of the world don't even have air conditioning. They might have heat, and it can be brutal. I just had a job in Michigan, and it was the end of the summer. It wasn't quite fall yet, and there was no air conditioning because it was happening. And part of it's just that the earth is getting warmer, and so where this place was built in the 70s, you didn't need air conditioning in the 70s. But now you do, and they haven't put it in yet. And so here I am, I've got fans going on. I don't like fans because of the noise. I'm not used to the fans. So I got a fan in the window. I got a fan at the door. I got, trying to get that cross ventilation. And man, it was brutal. It was just brutal trying to, there's just one sheet on me, you know what I mean? And some undies, the least amount of clothing, the most amount of airflow, but it was still 78, 9.
So when you're in that position, and actually different people will go extremes. Yes, what is the right temperature? The whole planet is a big giant bell curve. So there will be extreme people that actually need to warm up to fall asleep. And that's the change they're looking for, is that nesting. Tends to be more females, but it is definitely warming up all the way to the extreme of needing to cool down. But if you really are having a hard time falling asleep and you're just too hot because your metabolism, most people that work out have a higher metabolism, which means you're putting off more heat. Picture yourself as a Ferrari versus an economy engine. You're definitely just going to create more heat. You're not going to cool your Ferrari with fans ever. It's just not going to practically happen. So you need to put a little extra cooling into that equation before you go to sleep. So a cool shower, like cold shower. If you ever really can't go to sleep and you just need to, a 20-minute ice bath, about an hour you need to go to sleep, will be like an elephant tranquilizer. It will help knock you out. So even people with like MS, really extreme neurological conditions that struggle to sleep, that will help force that change. Now, we talked about my Chilisleep product, and that can help you do it during the night. But when you travel, or if there's other things and you're just stuck, work on cooling your body cooler than you think you would want it. And that will help kind of get you through. Picture the first half of the night again, your body is dropping 2 degrees core body temperature is what it wants to do. And so if you're already feeling hot, it's not going to drop 2 degrees core body temperature, and you are not going to sleep. Your Ferrari is busy revving without a radiator running.
Right. That's what happened. Yeah. And it's amazing how, depending on what you've got going on the next day, somehow you just sort of rally and pull it off. But you only can do that I only can do that for 24 hours, where I can, whatever, the room's the wrong temperature and I'm really uncomfortable and I didn't know it. I was supposed to take a cold shower, get in a tub full of ice, which if I had known, I would have certainly done it. And then the following day, was just rough. You're just trying to stay awake, and you're right. Like for me, I was on a shooting a movie and having to remember my lines and everything else. I was just working so hard. I mean, thank God I ingrained them into my head, but it just seemed like I was working harder than I should have. And then I had 2 days off, and and here's what's funny, the temperatures had dropped. And so I was more comfortable while asleep. I had days off, time to kind of recuperate, cooler temperatures. And then I was on set just why was it so hard 2 days ago? Because I was bad sleep, bad temperature, blah, blah, blah. And now I'm fatigued and now I can't perform. So it's just really interesting how critical that is. It's amazing. It's amazing. Anything else you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think back to, it is important. It looks like the question popped in about emotional
Mm,
stress, but those three pillars. So environment is definitely a really critical part. Every mechanism of sleep is entrained to some environmental part of that trigger, and knowing that sound and light and temperature, how those different basically levels are for you. Some are going to be more and more important than others, but all of them are. Our athletes, I actually train them to sleep with a specific sound. So hotel to hotel, New York City versus Arizona, they have to have one consistent sound. And so they don't have the
so the
luxury of quiet,
familiarity of that.
but it creates a ritual to trigger your brain. Okay, it's time. They also use, it's always crazy to think about baseball players, but their most popular thing is lavender pillow spray. Smell is something that triggers memory more than almost any other sense. So again, what's going to make you feel like you're home is a consistent environment. So even smell is something you can take on the road with you. And
Mm,
it isn't too big of a heavy thing. So back to, it doesn't have to be time, but it does need to have that consistency of, okay, it must be time to go to sleep. It smells like home. It sounds like home. Just
mm.
like you read, stories to children, give them a bath and read them a lullaby. That sort of ritual for grown-ups works exactly the same.
The sound, temperature, scent, lullaby for baseball players. I like that. Yeah, and
Yes,
now
it's crazy.
is lavender the best choice just because it's kind of a universal,
It
you
is,
know.
it is as an herb is naturally calming. So there is that effect of calming, but whatever's going to do that for you, for some people, it's maybe the same smell as their laundry, or there's people that'll travel with, they're very entrained to the scent of their spouse or significant other. Children in
Mm,
particular, very much like that's why they carry that blankie, is like the blankie feels like home.
mm,
So, whatever that is going to make you feel. And again, it's trainable. So just
right.
like anything else, you can train your brain. And again, if you're susceptible to sound and you like silence, I was the same way. I used to hate to travel. I grew up in rural Alberta, so there was never any real noise out there. Um,
Yeah.
and so different air conditioner, different, whatever those different things are, threw me off so bad every time that I
Mm,
actually just spent the time training my brain to, again, want a specific sound. And there's pink noise. It doesn't have to be like a lullaby, like, Rockabye Baby, but it can be a consistent noise. And I use
mm.
that consistent noise as a background. So it turns every hotel room into what I expect to sleep in.
And that's something you can just get in an app, I'm assuming, right? You can have
Oh
it on your
yeah,
phone.
YouTube, download. You can download some stuff off of our website at sleep.me, but literally Google noises to sleep to. And white noise, everyone's pretty familiar with that, but actually
Mhm.
for a lot of people is a little bit wrong frequency. Pink noise will most people get you to sort of soothe that. And there's different tracks for it. So just like any particular music, you'll find a track that's like, okay, that relaxes me.
Mm.
And then really work on trying to get to listen to that consistently. But yeah, since you travel a lot, I would definitely find a track, and it'll help eliminate that trying to get every hotel room to be as quiet as you want.
It's so amazing. I never thought of that. I never in a million years. And when I travel and I drive, if I'm going to where I'm in LA, if I go to Vegas or we go to my wife and I drive to Jackson Hole, I pack my pillow.
Mhm.
And that's
It's
just sort
probably
of
because it smells like home. It feels
it
like
sure
home. It's very
does. It sure
consistent.
does. It sure does. Yeah,
Mhm.
that's a big deal. Now, one of my questions is, and I think we kind of touched upon it, is are cooler temperatures better to sleep in than say warmer, or it's like you were saying, some people just like it to be warmer. So it really depends on it's really an individual thing. For me,
Yes.
like my brother-in-law, if you can believe this, keeps the temperature in their house. What was it at? 57. I think he had
Mhm.
57, which was just ridiculous. I mean, I couldn't get enough covers on me. I was freezing to death in there. Partly, I think, to save some money, but yeah, his whole family is just used to sleeping, on a frozen pond. It's great.
Yeah, so it's back to we forget that we are 98 degrees. We think of temperature in terms of this ambient temperature that's around us. By the time you put covers on, whatever you wear as pajamas or not, all of those influence what your mattress is, what your
Mm,
pillow's made of, All of those materials will reflect heat. Any of those foams are those little bubbles that feel good to sleep on, absorb your temperature and actually reflect it back to you when the bubble gets maxed out with heat. So about 3-4 hours, you're going to get that heat back. So if you think
Are you talking about the puffy part of the mattress?
yeah,
Or
so
the mattress
foam,
pad?
like if you ever tear apart foam, you see the little bubbles in it,
Yeah.
that's the problem a little bit. Foam is really comfortable, but it actually stores and reflects heat back to you. And so a lot of those foam or sort of man-made materials that feel amazing actually make it harder. Again, the caveman and how we adapted, there was a
On a cold rock in the cave. He was happy.
there was a lot of transfer of heat between animal skins and things into the environment. So at 98 degrees, you were able to drop those 2 degrees of core body temperature without a lot of effort. And that's what we want to facilitate. So again, if you're a Ferrari, you may put off enough heat. And I'm guessing your brother-in-law that needs to sleep cool is putting off a lot of heat. His body is generating a lot of heat. And so he needs an environment that can suck that off of him so that he doesn't heat. And different people, obviously, between size and all the other factors that go into what make us all unique. That amount of heat that you put off that's just thermodynamics. It's just physics of how much you as an engine put off into your environment. And if the environment insulates you like an oven with under your blankets, your little oven cave, you're not going to be able to drop those 2 degrees of core body temperature. And even if you have your environment super cold and it's just your head popping out, that's why a lot of people flip their pillows. It's your head then trying to vent all the heat that's under the covers. Again, think about it as 2 degrees is a big difference when you run a fever. It's the same as when you're trying to get cold at night and you can't create an environment that facilitates that, even just keeps it neutral, you're going to have a harder time sleeping. And for most people, colder will help them sleep better, certainly get more deep sleep. And that's the reason why we've created a super comfortable environment, not like sleeping like a caveman. It's actually not as good for us to sleep that way. So that's where we need to kind of go back to what's going to be the best way for us to sleep.
See, people, why I was so excited to have this conversation with Tara. Is it Tara or Tara? I want to make sure I get it right.
It's Tara, although my grandmother always called me Tara, so I always will answer to either one.
All right. So here's another one. It's just another question that I wrote. It's kind of a basic question, and I guess you've already covered it to some extent. But when it comes to fatigue and whatnot, but what are the other factors that affect your life when you're not getting good sleep? Like, why is good sleep just important in general when it comes to other things, when you wake up until when you go back to bed again?
Yeah, so when you look at the role of sleep, and we again rewind back to caveman, our brains actually don't file any memories. We don't generally heal during the day. If it is, a line ripped off your arm, it's going to do triage, but it's not going to focus on that repair. It's going to kind of hold it together. And the role of sleep is that sort of rest and recovery. That's where your growth hormone is released. When you look at sort of that cognitive self, immediately after falling into deep sleep, your spinal fluid actually comes up and washes your brain, and a good brainwashing, but it takes the toxins and tau proteins that are found in Alzheimer's and actually cleans that out. One of the things that doesn't happen with an Alzheimer's patient is that spinal fluid does not come up. And so over time, it just builds up. And so what happens even in memories as we get older is kind of like a messy desk. If you never filed memories, if during that process of sleep, we kind of emotionally and memory wise, you can remember what you had for lunch yesterday, but 2 weeks ago, you're going to forget that lunch unless there was something important that you did. Maybe you had a fight or there was some event that said, maybe I need to remember that. But that process of, do I need last Tuesday's lunch to stick, or can I drop that? All happens during sleep. So if you're not getting deep sleep, which is tied to those colder temperatures and generally happens in the first half of the night, you are not getting good quality sleep and you are not doing any of those processes, which are really important for longevity and health span. So if your brain is like your desk, cluttered and you never clean it off, you're not going to be able to find stuff. That looking for brain fog, or like, what was that called again? Those kind of moments come when our desk gets covered with crap and our brains aren't filing it. And so the same is for your cardiovascular system, the same is for every single system. So if you go system by system, your immune system, cardiovascular disease is increased. One of the highest days for heart attacks is actually daylight savings time, because we're getting less sleep. And so you can see the extra tax on a cardiovascular system will cause all of those problems. Every disease of the elderly is attached to lack of sleep. Every mental health disease is attached to lack of sleep. So lack of sleep it's one of those like fundamental parts of like, it does equal better, happier, do more life. So it is worth that investment. It is absolutely an investment, like any other thing, like choosing to go to the gym, choosing to work out, choosing to push yourself a little harder. We don't do that for sleep, and we have to start to. We have to say, can I get a little more quality sleep? Can I get a little more recovery? Can I make sure that I am taking time to manage stress in my life? And I think there was a question of like, my wife is dealing with emotional stress. Anxiety in particular is a huge problem across the board. Our society is chronically sort of squished with anxiety. And there's a lot of different methodologies. I definitely look into CBTI, which is cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia. And it sounds very big and complicated, but it's recognizing what's triggering that emotional stress. And if you think about stress, probably because I have 4 boys, but if you think about stress as a friendly
you've got
monster,
stress. Yeah.
well, and you wake up in the morning, that cortisol that I talked about, that is a sort of a stress homeworm, but it's good. It's going to help you work out. It's going to start your day.
Yeah, it's to get things done.
That workout, it's good. It's a good, happy monster to start the day. But if you, every time you get a little emotional trigger, let's say that person said something like, oh, that's off, or that person cut you off, that's off, or wow, I'm not going to pay that bill, I'm stressed out about that. Whatever those are, they build up all day. And so when, I know you have a question about breathing, but when you manage stress all day, instead of when you get into bed at night, the monster that you're sitting next to, and that stress monster, is a mountain, and you're trying to break that down and your head's spinning and you can't get it to stop. That process really needs to start in the morning. Get outside, get sunlight, really focus on your day. Dopamine starts in the morning. And if you need enough dopamine and serotonin by the end of the day to combat that stress, you have to build it up. It's really hard to manufacture it in the moment and like crush all that emotional stress that's weighing you down. It's literally for a lot of people, it'll feel like a weight on their chest of like, I just can't go to sleep. But it starts in the morning. On your best self, wake up, express gratitude. If it's spiritual part, if it's prayer for you, whatever that is that makes you release that trigger of stress, plant a seed in your head. I talk to people about what is that one image or word that does that for you. And every time you start to feel stress, you go to that and you go to breathing and you stop it in its tracks. And it's an exercise in tiny little bits along the way to reduce that. But when most people tackle it at night and they get into bed, it's a huge weighted monster on their chest and it feels insurmountable, but it is really hard at that point to take that mountain down.
Well, when I look at that question here, just to read the whole thing, and then we'll get to that really complicated thing that you were saying, that acronym, but she's under a great deal of emotional stress, and has the type of brain that won't turn off. Soothing baths, prayer, meditation have helped on a limited basis. And what did you suggest now? What was that acronym that you used? There's some sort of a test.
Just CBTI. So cognitive CBT, and then a little I is usually how it'll appear on the internet, but it's cognitive behavioral therapy. There's all sorts of exercises out there. It's a pretty common psychological approach. And the best way to sum it up is how to fall in love with yourself and sleep again.
Oh, wow.
And it's just breaking down all of those little triggers and things that turn that into a really big thing. The other thing I would suggest is weighted blankets. I also, talked about my history with trauma and depression. So anxiety is something I always have to deal with as well. And if you haven't tried a weighted blanket, it's super simple. It's, was started for children with autism. And it's just about feeling bundled. So if you've ever watched a baby be swaddled, this is the grown-up version. I recommend trying it. A lot of people are like, oh, I'm not sure I like it. Try some smaller weight. Try it on the top part of your body. Let your feet be out. That'll often let you feel less claustrophobic with it. But that feeling of pressure on you actually releases serotonin. No drugs, no crazy complicated stuff.
Weighted blankets.
Weighted blankets.
And they're specifically made for that. Like, where would you purchase a weighted blanket? Where would you go?
So we do have them on our site because I'm in love with them. They can make you really hot. So we do have temperature regulation in ours. That's sort of the differentiating factor, but you can go on Amazon, Bed Bath & Beyond.
No, the heck with those. Let's go to yours.
Yeah. But again, pick a weight that you want to start with. Most people that have high anxiety will continue to kind of move up in what that weight feels good like. And you'll get to a weight that's like, okay, that feels amazing. And are they sold by the pound kind of thing? Yeah. Actually, you get a 15 pound, 20 pound, you can stack them. I know Kelly Starrett, who's on our medical board, I think he's at 35 pounds, like different people will have different weights that kind of work out for what they want to. Then there's a little experimentation, kind of like everything else, to figure it out, but start, 10, 15 pounds, start with it on your chest. Start with doing your breathing activities or exercises in conjunction with that. So if you're, again, having a hard time letting it stop spinning, I'd recommend Yoga Nidra, which is meditation plus sort of muscle clenching and relaxation. So meditation, just trying to manage your thoughts, or breathing, just trying to breathe. Combine all three of those things of muscle tensing and relaxing, breathing, focus, and then the weighted blanket on top. And you've created yourself a little cocoon bubble to start tackling that big mountain of anxiety that you're facing.
Wait, and so that would be, your site is sleep.me.
Sleep.me.
Geez, you can't get that wrong. That's easy to remember. Now this is probably an old-fashioned question. I don't know if old-fashioned is the right word, but it's sort of something that maybe most people know, but I'm always sort of curious to hear what your answer would be on this. Can you explain the difference between deep sleep and REM sleep, and where they appear in the cycle of sleep? And is there another version? Is there a third or fourth one, or is it basically just deep sleep and REM sleep, or is there something else? And how often should they be happening for a good night's sleep? And what do they provide for us, either one of them?
So the complicated answer is that they're all about the frequency of your brain waves. That's actually how you define all different types of sleep, is the frequency of your brain waves. So as you can imagine, there's ranges that are defined as deep, there's ranges that are defined as light, and there's ranges that are defined as REM. And REM was the first sleep that we could measure because it actually stands for rapid eye movement. Yeah. So if you ever watch someone sleeping and their eyes are kind of doing the darting under their eyelids, that's rapid eye movement. Your brain looks almost like it's awake from a brain frequency perspective. And everything else was actually called non-REM because that was. So
the deep and the light is non-REM.
It's just all non-REM.
What's the difference between light and REM?
So it's actually just part of that slowing down. So you'll go through cycles. And if you ever do sleep tracking, it's not pretty. It's not like 90-minute cycles where you see it go down and then it goes up. And like if you Google hypnograph, it makes it look like it's really pretty and exact, and like 90-minute cycles of like nobody's right on the button and it doesn't do this. It'll do kind of fluctuations based on what's going on in your body. And again, how it's responding to those environmental triggers that you're measuring unconsciously.
The sense, the sounds, and the temps. Yeah.
Yes, all of that stuff. So again, if you're looking at a sleep tracker, you're like, I don't see where the 90-minute cycles are. But in general, that's how it's working. You're not going to get deep sleep for like truly just 4 hours. It's all going to be deep. You do kind of fluctuate and someone talked about waking up in the middle of the night, you do release hormones, so you shouldn't get up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom. Often that is tied to being in REM sleep and you're too hot. So again, REM sleep likes it warm and it'll pull your brain up. So again, if you're waking up to go to the bathroom and you don't have bladder issues or issues where you're going to the bathroom frequently during the day, you shouldn't have those issues at night. You should release a hormone that it doesn't happen. So it means you actually probably should try sleeping cooler because
I'm going lower than 70 then. That's it.
Yeah, then there's something that's triggering you to be awake. Something in your environment says, oh, you should be awake. And then you go to the bathroom because that's the habit that as adults we do when we get up in the middle of the night, like I'm going to relieve my bladder so I can go back to sleep. But that's all it is. It's really shouldn't be, again, if you have it during the day, you might have it at night. But if you don't have anything during the day, you should not be getting up at night. It's absolutely keep tweaking your environment until it goes away.
So I have a sheet, I have a down comforter, and I have a super thin merino wool blanket on top of that. So it's just about, for me, is it just taking some layers off? Like the last thing I need is a weighted blanket.
Or I'm going to have to convince you to buy a chili pad. So the way the chili pad works is back to the engine. It works as a radiator that goes underneath you. It runs water, just like that water bed. It's just a lot less water, so it doesn't cause the same kind of water bed issues.
And this goes on top of the mattress, and then
and then your sheet, and then you sleep on top of that, and then whatever you want to cover up with, whether it's weighted blankets or comforters or whatever you want that feels good for you to sleep with, sleep naked, do whatever you want to do. But this will maintain that. And all it does is it pulls that extra heat out of your body. So it facilitates that sleep. So again, making sure that there's no sounds that are triggering you to wake up. And again, if you're really tied to silent, you hear a noise that may also trigger, even if it's something in the distance, the compressor in the refrigerator kicking on, whatever those things are. So again, work on making sure there isn't anything in your environment that's going to trigger you to wake up, and then you shouldn't wake up in the middle of the night.
So the Chilisleep basically replaces the mattress pad.
Yeah, it's just like a mattress pad, but it's just temperature regulation between 55 and 115. And wherever you want to set it, you can set a schedule. So I set a schedule because I do like to warm up a little bit to fall asleep. My husband likes it super cold. He would get along in a 57-degree house. Great. And so we each have our own schedules, which is good. Which is actually where the invention came from, because we didn't like to sleep at the same temperature. So that's why we had to fix that.
So does half the bed, do they come 50-50?
Yeah, so you can also just do half the bed if you just want to do it just for you. But yeah, so we have our own schedules, our own remotes, like nothing, there's a side of the bed for each temperature. And then I do recommend that first half of the night, you do get cooler. Picture again, back to your wake up time, you can calculate that minimum temperature of the lowest core body temperature is 3 hours from when you would normally wake up. You want to sort of have that be your cutoff point to start to warm up.
Wow. Fascinating. So good. Well, sleep.me people. I'll be ordering mine after we're done with this conversation. I have another question. Well, let's answer somebody else's, because mine are piling up over here. So let's see what some people have to say. I fall asleep okay. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night, usually to pee. Okay, maybe we've covered this already. And sometimes I can't fall back asleep. This doesn't always happen, but when it does, how can I fall asleep again?
So this is something that is when people wake up in the middle of the night, their brain has started to trigger, and that makes it harder to go to sleep. So again, we have Yoga Nidra on our site. It sounds crazy. It sounds like when people hear yoga, they think putting on yoga pants and doing movement.
Yeah. I'm in Warrior 3 on my bed. That seems
not that. Not that. It needs a new name, but again, I'm Yoga Gurus. That's what they named it. But it actually can give you the same type of recovery, HRV scores, resting heart rate, as actually falling asleep. So start there. What I like about it is and you can Google, there's YouTube, ours is, our gal Tally has a British accent. So if that helps you fall asleep, whatever that is, or a guy you want to hear, there is a million versions of Yoga Nidra on the internet. So pick one you like. But it's generally about 20 minutes. And you're going to start clenching and releasing your muscles as you're doing breathing. So again, you're combining both that sort of movement part where you're forcing your muscles. It helps refocus, especially if you got a lot spinning on your night. And when it's super quiet out, sometimes it actually makes it harder to like zone in on a meditation or breathing. But it'll help you sort of get back into that sleep mode. Most people will fall asleep during a yoga nidra, even if I do it in the middle of the day. Like with the baseball players, we have a fun picture of like putting a whole room of baseball players to sleep doing it. It was just kind of in the middle of the day. So you can use it for napping, you can use it whenever, but if you have high anxiety about falling back to sleep, if you tell yourself, and this is how I fell in love with it, is like, it's okay. I'm still getting recovery. I'm still relaxing. I'm still giving myself what it needs. And so you can relax about whether you fall asleep or not. You're still recovering. You're still resting. You're still helping your body feel better. And sometimes just that act of like, I'm not worried about what the clock says. I'm just going to enjoy this. And you may do it 2 or 3 times sometimes because there's high anxiety to get to sleep, but it's a really powerful technique and not difficult and really, really good, especially if you're an active person. Moving your body and breathing really does help refocus that meditation. It takes some of that nervous energy out.
Is it kind of like a body scan meditation where you're just kind of you're flexing your face and your neck and you go to your shoulders and your chest and your back and your pelvis and then back up again, or just down or just up?
Yep. It depends. You know, they'll do slightly different versions of it, but as a whole, that's basically what it is.
Right. I mean, for me, you know, I mean, I'm no expert, but I do box breathing, which always puts me back to sleep, you know, 4x4 box, whatever you want to call it. And just that, you know, that big inhalation, 4 count, hold 4 count, let it out 4 count, hold 4 count, and repeat. And I never know how many times. I just, because boom, I'm gone. Because what that does for me, it just distracts my mind from all the gobbledygook from being, you know, and that's sometimes when and here's the thing, it's the one thing Shauna hates about me. She'll count how many seconds I fall asleep and my head hits the pillow. She'll just go 1, 13, I'm gone.
Yeah.
I mean, I've always been a pretty good sleeper. But for me, it's that inconsistency. And what you and I were talking about before, which I like to touch upon now, is you don't think it's necessary, especially if you're traveling, like baseball players, their hours are crazy, and everybody has crazy hours. If it were up to me and I didn't have a job, I would get up at 10 and I go to bed at 2 every night. That would be ideal. But I don't have that life. Sometimes I have to work out in the morning. Sometimes I have to work out at night. Not because of my schedule as much as because of all the people that I work out with. So their schedules are changing, and I'd rather work out with somebody as opposed to just always, you know, I just don't like working out alone. So I'm a prisoner to other people's schedule because I want to make sure I get my 5 to 6 workouts in a week. But because it's that, because some days like, oh, I don't have to get up this morning and I'll sleep till 9, you know what I mean? And there was a time in my life when I had to get up at 4:30 every day for bunch of years to train, you know, people in the dark. My first 2 clients in the morning, way back when, it was still dark when I left my second client because they were, whatever, they had long commutes or they were, you know, big executives. That's where they wanted to work out at the crack of dawn or before the crack of dawn. Yeah. And so, you know, I was always sleep deprived back in those days. But even now, I have those days where I got to get up at 7 and then I want to get up at 9. And then sometimes I feel guilty about getting up at 9. Like, get up, dude. So anyway.
No, I mean, again, back to like falling in love with sleep for me is about the myth of 8 hours is truly a myth. We need good quality sleep. Actually, as a night person, you have the amazing ability. Most morning people will struggle with naps. It's much more disruptive to us than it is for night people. You should do a 20-minute nap 2 or 3 times a day if you need to, and then that'll help you get back on schedule. But
2 or 3 20 minutes. That's the greatest news I've ever heard. Everybody who's listening, that's just the greatest. Not that I could do that.
Between 10 to 20 minutes. So keep it short. Your brain will absolutely recover in that amount of time. And if you have a hard time where you are too sleep deprived and you want to sort of lean into it, it's actually called a power nap, but you can take some caffeine. It takes about between 10 and 20 minutes for caffeine to hit your neuroreceptors. So if you caffeinate and then nap, it'll actually help bring you back up so you don't accidentally sleep too long, or set yourself a little schedule. But that is going to recharge your brain and will go really far towards your overall sleep part. And it'll allow you to keep your, more flexible schedule.
this is the greatest conversation I've ever had in my life. This is so awesome. Wow. Like everything you're saying is really cool and really news to me. And as somebody in my position, I probably should have known more. The only thing I've ever told people is, my whole thing is about mindfulness. Like I have 10 mindfulness practices, and sometimes it's meditation, and sometimes it's a nap, and sometimes it's listening to music, and sometimes it's going outside and taking a walk, and sometimes it's playing with my pet Charlie, or sometimes it's going around and futzing around in the garden. It really depends on, and I like the fact that I have those 10 choices.
Absolutely.
So let me ask you this. On those days, and I'm sure other people can kind of relate to this, and a lot of people's schedules are obviously different than mine. They work all day, so there's not going to be 20-minute naps.
You can go out to your car, put the seat back, take 20 minutes.
Right. Yeah. Like if you have an hour lunch, you do a quick lunch before or after your nap. Yeah, that's certainly a great option. So on those days where I'm a little tuckered out and I didn't sleep ideally the night before, and I have one of those 10 things, is a walk in the sunshine better than the nap or the meditation? Or is it just sort of, is one better than the other? Like listening to music, sometimes I'm kind of out of it and I don't really feel, I just crank on some nice chilly music.
I actually love that you're listening and that you have a list. So the reason I talk about the pillars of sleep, and I hope you fill those pillars with items just like you have of, okay, these are the top things of my environment. You may find that sound is higher than temperature for you. I don't know. Those are, but within those pillars, and if you listen, 90% of our body time, we actually know what we need. And if you don't, pick something off the list, because all of those things will help. So if you're in an indecision, I don't know what I want to do, and pick something off the list, you're going to win with all of those.
No matter what it is. Yeah.
No matter what it is, you're taking some time, and actually change is one of our most powerful things we can do as humans. We are designed to have change happen throughout our day, and all of those things change your mindset, stop you from what you were doing, give your brain a break, and allows you to go back. All of them are powerful tools for that. And again, if the garden feels good because it's a sunny day and the earth is warm, and hands in the dirt is going to be what does it because it's that day, do that. But it's rainy and yucky, and the only thing you got is
not the day.
Not going to do that. So there's the in the moment, it sounds very hokey, but listen to what your body needs. And a lot of the time it really does know. And sometimes you'll head out for a walk and like, nope, this isn't it. I'm actually going to go listen to music.
Yeah, right. And I love the fact that you get out there and go, sometimes I'll just power through it. And then the fact that now that you're telling me, no, this is not where I want to be. So I take 12 steps, I turn around and go back inside. Let me ask you, and let me get to somebody else's question here. My husband has more deep sleep at night and I have more REM sleep. Do men and women differ in this way?
Men and women differ in all sorts of ways when it comes to sleep. And the first disclosure is actually women have been horribly understudied in all sorts of aspects of health, in full disclosure, but definitely when it comes to sleep. Sleep is a relatively new science when it comes to studying sleep. So in the last 20 years, really since 2000, is when we've really started to hunker down on, hey, what is this sleep thing? Maybe it has a big impact. One of the first articles that tied lack of sleep to a health outcome was in 1999. We've known chronotype since 1970 and just decided, that circadian rhythm stuff, we knew it. It just, wasn't that important. Your primary care physician spends no time in residency in sort of the 90s on sleep. That's why it's easier to hand you a drug. They don't know about sleep. That's changing, but it's all relatively new. So, again, the details and the science really become that women tend to be more emotionally charged. REM tends to be the dreams that you remember. They tend to be a little bit more where you're going through emotional things. If you look at the brain waves of someone with PTSD or mental health stuff, they spend way more time in REM sleep than they do in deep. They can't get deep sleep often as part of that profile. So women are, and again, it's very stereotypical, but women tend to be more emotionally charged. They're going to spend more time dealing and thinking about their emotions, even when they're sleeping. And so we will be predisposed to that REM sleep versus deep sleep. But that doesn't mean that that's, again, categorical. It's just there's sort of propensities. The other thing is women tend to be worse sleepers. Our hormones and cycles actually throw off our temperature. They throw off our sleep patterns. And all of that happens even worse as all of us age, men and women. Deep sleep becomes almost non-existent. So by the time we're 80, we may only get a couple minutes of deep sleep. A 20-year-old guy, ideal sleep conditions, is going to get 2 hours of deep and 2 hours of REM. It's absolutely possible to get that at any age, but the average person is down to like minutes or none at all by the time they're 80. And so that deep sleep is where there's a lot of focus right now on studying it, because it's a little more elusive. It's the unicorn of sleep. It's when you get lots of deep sleep, you wake up in the morning, you're like, I feel amazing. Not getting as much REM, you don't have that same sort of euphoria, but the deep sleep is tied to that. I feel great. What am I going to do today? Is tied to a good balance.
And a lot of people don't have that ever.
No,
they don't have that. I feel great, man. And here's what's interesting that you brought that up. So, I set my alarm for my workout crew. I set the alarm 15 minutes before they walk in the door. That gives me enough time to get dressed, to brush my teeth, to get my hair looking like something, and to get my pre-workout formula. And then the bell rings. You know what I mean? All I need is that 15 minutes. But I woke up more than an hour. I woke up, and usually it's the alarm that gets me up, because sometimes I have to get up to go to the bathroom. But I fall asleep pretty well most nights, not always. But this morning was sort of strange in the sense that I woke up an hour before I was supposed to, and I just felt like I wanted to do 100 things. And what I did was I just laid there. I laid there and I went, okay, well, I'm not all uptight when I don't sleep. I go, hey, I'm lying down, I'm relaxed. You know what I mean? If my mind's a little bit busy, I'm okay with that. I'll do some box breathing, or I'll just sort of enjoy whatever's going on in my head. I don't really make you like, like my wife is like, I'm not sleeping. It's the end of the world. Where I go, well, it's probably okay. Cause it's like, you're lying there. That's pretty restorative. Should I have gotten up and gotten busy, or was it silly just to lay there for the whole hour?
No. In general, if you're waking up an hour early and you don't feel tired, you feel great. Chances are your body's gotten what it needed. So you're ready to go. So go ahead and use the perk of that day of the stars aligning, and you got the sleep that you.
And I got that extra hour where nothing was planned, but there's so many things that could have gotten done. And I also have the option of 2 or 3 20-minute naps later in the day if I need it.
Exactly. Take it as you need to.
Yeah. Awesome.
So dreams, everybody dreams, and actually you dream deep sleep, light sleep, and REM sleep. You remember your dreams in REM sleep more. So if you're remembering your dreams, it's because you're fluctuating between the awake and asleep time, and that's when we can remember them. We don't tend to remember our dreams in deep sleep so much. That's where we're filing those memories and determining.
So if we wake up in deep sleep,
well, we're likely to remember. Like if you woke someone up in deep sleep, they would remember, they could tell you the dream that they had, and those memories tend to be more about filing something like last Tuesday's lunch. You're reliving that in some form. You may be dressed as a dinosaur, you may be doing some weird thing. That's the perk of dreams, but it is very likely around trying to figure out in the last 2 weeks, what do I need to remember or not?
Is that so? Because here's it's
all really good. It's all really healthy. Dream lots.
Dreams. I have lots of questions about dreams. When I was in my 20s, we did a sort of a dream study. We read a book about dreams and the significance of like what they mean. Like, it's World War II. I'm in a bathtub with Bob Hope, and we got a rubber ducky. What does that mean? You know what I'm saying? Anyway, that was far-fetched and weird. But is there a significance to analyzing dreams and sort of how that subconscious circus in the middle of the night relates to something later in the day that we should be addressing? The reason why I bring that is my friend Chuck Gaylord, who is a 3-time All-American gymnast. His brother Mitch Gaylord won silver, bronze, and silver, bronze, and gold medals at the 80 or 84 Olympics. And Mitch had this dream about this move. He woke up and he was like, whoa, and he wrote it down, and it's named after him now.
Mhm.
And he and his brother practice it and practice it. Go, no, this isn't possible. It's a dream. It's not a thing. And he goes, well, just put the wires on me and let's try this thing. And he pulled it off. And that's the reason why he won gold in the all around that year. So that particular dream had a substantial effect on him as a human being and his career and everything else. So should we pay more attention to them, or is it for the most part just silly gobbledygook in our head?
So there is a bunch that simply that it's just brain, firing and working through that. What you're talking about though is actually there's a type of sleep that usually happens within the first 5 minutes of sleeping. It's called hypergogic. Another version can happen within 5 minutes of waking up. And Thomas Edison, Van Gogh, lots of famous people have used this for exactly that. So there are evidence throughout the ages of people using this. What's really special about it, if you're a Matrix fan or some sort of sci-fi fan, if you were to take all of the rules out, so there's very few physical limitations within that type of dreaming. So this is, jumping,
Flying and
building, flying. This is, again, from your example, if I were to fly as a gymnast, what is the move that I could do that would be phenomenal? All of the limitations that he would have of like, I haven't spun that way before, I haven't twisted that way, that's not possible. All of those go out the window. And this is the time your brain has been designed to think through and problem solve. Back to even as hunter-gatherer, okay, that lion keeps showing up then. How am I going to solve this? And that is an integral part of the analysis of how to get through and solve and make tools and get better. Dreams and sleep are an integral part of that. The other side of dreams happens, and you'll see a lot of talks about psychedelics that are happening right now and how they're being used to treat severe trauma and PTSD. Our brains actually have a system to do that. It's called lucid dreaming. You can actually self-steer, and if you look it up, there's a whole methodology on lucid dreaming. It's very similar experience to what those psychedelics chemically create in your brain, where a therapist is going to guide you through that. But when you are able to steer your dreams, you can actually cognitively work through all sorts of other things. And it is a lot of people that naturally lucid dream have had trauma in their lives. It is a natural response that does happen. You can also train yourself to lucid dream, where you can sort of do that sort of practice. And it does allow you to work through some of those things in a dream state where you can replay that 60 times if you want to. You can try out telling someone to go stick it in their ear, and you can kind of play through that. Whatever that is, your brain loves doing all of that during sleep. It's designed to be able to have that freedom during sleep. So it's an incredibly powerful thing of dreams. There is a whole lot of gobbledygook that happens. And if you spend a lot of time analyzing the bathtub versus a boat, it could be just because you saw a bathtub and that's where your brain has put that context.
9 times out of 10, I wake up and go, okay, I know exactly why. I thought, you take all the weird stuff that's happened through the day or the week, and they all merge together into this goofy story that doesn't make any sense. But, it's interesting when you talk about it's lucid sleep. Is that what it's called?
Lucid dreaming.
What's the other one that happens 5 minutes before you go to bed? And
hypnagogic.
So it's funny because when I did stand-up comedy for a short time. I attempted to. I wasn't very funny apparently, but it was, it was good practice for thickening my skin. But one of my best bits I ever did on stage was based on a dream where I was lying in bed and I knew I was sleeping, but everything in my mind was so vivid I could control it. Like, I don't want to wear that.
Exactly
I want a hat on now. Where are my glasses? You know what I mean? Or whatever. Or I could control everything in the dream. And I'm just laying, and it doesn't happen as much as it used to. It happened quite often back in those days, but it was really a blast to be able to go, I'm making my own movie. This is kind of cool. I wanted these people to be here. Whatever happened to so-and-so? And what happens to me a lot of times in that first 5 minutes, in that last 5 minutes, is names and faces that I haven't thought of or seen in decades pop up. I mean, there was a friend of mine, I forgot about this great friend of mine. And I woke up and I wonder if does she live in LA? Whatever. I called up an old number that was 15 years old. She picked up the phone. I was like, oh my God. And now she's working out with me. It's great to see her. And she's met my wife. And it's just because the dream, her face and
the cogs
popped
unlocked
up. And it was like, Yeah, it's really neat.
Our brains are really phenomenal things. We're just starting to scratch the surface. And certainly when it comes to sleeping, I did just before COVID, a sort of MIT Media Lab is kind of their play area. If you picture, they even have Legos, but Legos for really smart people. They did a dream engineering, and they are doing amazing things of being able to take pictures out of people's brains of what they're thinking about and dreaming about. And the future of what we think and know about all exists in those neurons is absolutely phenomenal, and it's just starting.
So the other thing too that I think I heard you say is, because that 5 minutes, when you go to bed and when you wake up, creates who'd you say, Van Gogh or what?
Yeah, Salvador Dali used that. If you ever, again, it depends on which version, but Thomas Edison.
Yeah.
Yep, you can Google pictures of him. He would hold steel balls in his hands. He would take a short nap too. And he would lay on his workbench. So you can see black and white pictures of him holding 2 steel balls. And what happens at the end of hypergogic sleep is your muscles relax. So if you ever felt your muscles relax, that's what happened. So the balls would hit the floor and he would wake up, but he would,
oh my gosh.
So he did it chronically to solve, like if he got stuck on something, that would be absolutely what he would use to do that. But there's pictures of it. Again, Google Thomas Edison and steel balls or whatever that is, and it'll all pop up. But
and I would assume that once people began to realize the importance of those hypergogic, am I saying that right?
Mm-hmm.
Sleep. I mean, that's part of evolution. That's I'm sure how many things like things that scientists at NASA or the invention of the wheel or fire. I mean, it goes, who knows how far it goes back. It was probably happening because people were, it's like, they didn't judge whatever, they didn't think
sleep on it.
Silly. They
make a decision, sleep on it. Absolutely better. It's better to sleep on if you want to memorize something, because again, even you're back to your 20-minute nap. If you need to read something and memorize it, take a 20-minute nap. It'll get stuck in your brain way more. That's
so read it, and then take your nap.
Yep.
Oh, where were you when I was in Michigan? I learned trying to learn those lines the hard way. That is unbelievable. There's a question up here. Maybe we already covered. What does it mean if I have a lot of dreams very often? Would this be considered bad, having dreams all the time? No,
you actually do have dreams all the time. A lot of people won't remember them just on how their habits are with their sleep. Different people actually visualize. There's people that will visualize in pictures. There's people that will visualize in words. How we visualize in our brains will actually influence how we remember those dreams as well. So it's part of it's just all different brains, and people are going to, just like they communicate and visualize differently, they're going to do that in dreams as well. And then I see the mouth tape one. So the one thing about, people talk about snoring or CPAP machines or mouth tape. What happens with that is as we get older, our tendons will cause us to snore, or that breathing airway is closing. So mouth tape can be really helpful in keeping your mouth open and helping you breathe better, because turns out, back to breathing's really helpful. And especially when you're sleeping, getting an oxygenated brain when you're sleeping is just as important as when you're awake. But especially if you're heavier or you're older, what's happening with those tendons, and if you're sleeping on your back in particular, it's going to cause those airways to be not as open. Obviously, there's all different extremes to that. If a mouth tape often works for some people, it may have to go all the way to a CPAP for someone else. But it is really thinking about making sure you get enough oxygen is really important always. And so mouth taping, proper breathing when you're sleeping is really important. I know CPAP machines are terrible, but they're actually more of a breathing problem than an actual sleeping problem. It's a breathing problem that happens while you're sleeping.
Well, it's interesting. This question is probably because I brought this up a bunch of times with a bunch of people that I know, is that, I was a mouth breather when I slept, and I probably was a lot during the day as well. So I read James Nestor's book, Breath. And I don't know if you've read that book or not, but, he talks about the whole history of it and everything else. And like this particular tribe in the Midwest called the Mankin tribe, and they would wrap their kids' mouths immediately the minute they were born to force them to breathe through their nose. And, he talks about the science of mouth breathing as opposed to nose breathing, and, mouth breathing, according to all the research that he's done and the research that he looked up, that mouth breathing is about as horrible as it gets. And so I became an immediate, because here's how I sleep at night. Shauna loves this.
But it's not great for your airways, unfortunately. So you're not getting the oxygen you need. So again, it's just forcing your body to do the breathing that it's supposed to do to get enough oxygen to your brain. And so whatever that works, I know some people don't tolerate very well, but again, try training yourself to it, or at least be open to what other solutions there might be. At least sleeping on your side versus, again, head back, mouth open. Sometimes on your side, you'll keep your mouth closed more than on your back. Just
tape it up, man. I had a conversation with a gentleman just this past weekend, and the person hosting the party says, "Yeah, you got to talk to gosh, what was his name? Ray, I think, because you guys have both read the book and you're both taping your mouths." So we were like, and then of course we have the conversation. People over here are thinking, "What are you talking about?" So that is this brand spanking new philosophy and ideas about how to just get better sleep and get better, oxygenated blood into the brain and everything else. But I'm a convert. I can't imagine not having my mouth taped at night, and the thing is too, I also noticed that, if I do get up early when I don't want to, I start to take it off just to see if as I'm kind of in and out of sleep again, whether I'll stay with my mouth closed. And I think I've trained myself without the tape, but still, it's done wonders for me, and Shauna certainly appreciates it as well. So yes, but then again, once it's on, the conversation's over. So it's like, all right, we got everything, we're good. Well, all right, tomorrow morning, okay. And then I tape and go, and she'll tap me. I go, I can't help you anymore.
Todd is the same way, and so it's sort of like, well, good night. And then it just is what it is. But I will say that there is actually sleeping with a partner, learning to love and figure out that best sleeping for both of you actually releases all sorts of good hormones like oxytocin. It's actually really healthy for you to have a partner to sleep with. And just like any other relationship, a sleeping relationship requires honesty and acceptance and all of those different pieces, because when you sleep better, relationships are better. World peace will be solved with everyone sleeping better. There's a good chance that will help a lot.
Yeah, that's great. Let me see. Now I have, and we're already at 15 after, so we're basically, these are about 90 minutes. So I don't know if you were told that or not. So maybe we'll do kind of a speed round here. Okay. So we've covered some of the stuff already here that I have on my page. Can you talk a little bit? I mean, this is sort of my area of expertise, and I think we've touched upon it, but maybe we can get into a deeper discussion about that. Is how does lack of exercise and or exercise affect people and their sleep?
So exercise has, again, it's similar to the conversation about sleep. How is sleep beneficial? Exercise goes well beyond just the physically moving of your body. There's the mental state, the release of good hormones. It's beyond just the mechanical parts of working out. It is really important. Our bodies were meant to move. And so whatever movement works for you, by the time you're 80, maybe it's just walking, or maybe you're still working out at 80. I don't know what that is. And maybe you're more prone to yoga than CrossFit, or whatever that version is. Finding a way to move and keep moving in your life will absolutely you'll have less depression. You will be a happier person. Your cardiovascular systems and all those other health metrics are all very clear. But when you think about working out or moving your body, that healthy balance and release of pushing your body and relaxing your body, again, cycling is good in all versions. So cold cycling, you'll hear about it, but physical cycling, that's what working out is. It's you're moving your body to a point of uncomfortable and to push yourself. We actually need to be uncomfortable. As humans, we strive to be comfortable all the time.
Yeah.
Turns out uncomfortable is better for us. Actually, it pushes our brains. It causes us to move. We need to change. We need to constantly be doing stuff. And so movement, working out is an integral part of how we as beings need to interact with our environment. We need to push, again, that interval training, which is any workout is some element. It may be one big interval, but it's all intervals of training and off. And we need to do that on a regular cadence in our lives, or again, it affects everything.
You know, it's interesting. There's two things that pop into my head. I hope I can remember them both. But, you know, it's fascinating how, like, for example, we had Dr. Mindy on a couple of weeks back, and she's talking about the importance of fasting. She's written a book called Fast Like a Girl. It's just absolutely amazing. And then we had another gal on just talking purely about meditation, the types of meditation. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to be in Lotus and doing that for an hour and a half. You know, you can do a 2-minute meditation and create amazing change. And of course, you know, like if you look at the Power 4, this new program that I've created, it's exercise, it's nutrition, you know, it's mindfulness, and it's supplementation, right? So the 4 things that I try to, you know, do, and that seems to help people. But there's all these other categories, you know, like meditation, like fasting, like proper sleep. And for some people, it's like, oh my God, how many things do I have to get really good at before any of this, before I become the person I want to become? But once it's ingrained, and once you kind of practice for a while, you're not going to be perfect out of the box, you know, when it comes to any of this stuff. But what's really, really interesting is, you know, I'm seeing a lot of people, you know, in my community, people who have been following me for a while, who are beginning to get it, you know what I mean? And they understand the fact that it's not going to all happen overnight. I'm not going to learn all these things all, because there's a lot of things that you've covered, right? And unless people are taking a whole lot of notes, but they have your website, they got Sleep.
Yep, I've got it. Everything I've talked about is in blogs and things like that. But think about, like, when your computer goes wonky, all of us will have to restart our phones or restart our computer sometimes. We need to turn off and we need to turn back on. We need a cycle. And you can look at it as insurmountable, or if you just, again, look at what are the different pillars or aspects of your life, and are you cycling your environment? Are you cycling your behaviors? Are you cycling your mindset? And in those elements of who we are, you find a holistic view of how to cycle and move through your life and turn off those variables. Maybe you have the 10 choices. You don't do all 10 every day, but create yourself a list of what feels good to turn off some of those major categories every day.
You know, it's interesting. And then I will do these 2 questions right here in a little speed round. But there are so many people who are still struggling in so many categories of their life. And a lot of them are exercising and eating better. And they go, well, why am I still struggling here? And why am I still stressed out? And why am I not losing weight? And why can't I build muscle mass? And, you know, why are my cortisol levels through the roof? And it is a mindfulness practice and meditation. It is, you know, doing the things that you've talked about tonight to help improve your sleep. It is learning that fasting could be a big game changer for a lot of people. And that, you know, that's what I love having conversations. This has been fascinating talking to you.
Yeah, we have to become scientists of our own body. We are a big giant bell curve, and all the variables you've talked about and I've talked about are all aspects of that. And somewhere you're going to fit in a bell curve on every single one of those variables. And you as a person owe it to yourself and your body and your mind to discover what are those variables or triggers that are going to do that. And you can either look at it as a job, or you can use it as a discovery, exploration, as an explorer of you over time and a lifetime to learn about yourself. And it constantly will change. It'll evolve. So whatever you've mapped out before, you may have to remap as you hit a new spot in life or enter a new stage of what you're doing. You can either embrace it as I'm an explorer and discoverer of me, and embrace that me journey, or you can turn it into work. But it's how you see it. It's the glass is always full because it's full of air, it's full of a vacuum, it's full of something else. It's never half full. It's your choice to see what's in that other half. And
you know, it's interesting. You can lead a lot of people to water, and they're either going to sip or they're not. And some people are just curious and other people aren't. Like some people just sit in a problem forever and ever and ever because nobody else is doing all this newfound funky stuff that we're talking about, or fasting. What are you doing, man? I mean, I mean, if we care a lot less about what other people think about what we're trying to do to make our lives better, that would be step number one, I would say. Be curious and act on certain things and try certain things. Either they resonate with you or they don't. But, and then give yourself some time and patience to be able to notice these changes. There's all kinds of stuff that I'm going to do after our conversation. Let me get to these last two questions because we're already at 23 after here. I just went off birth control for 2 months. I just went off birth control 2 months ago and dream more now. Do you know which hormone causes this?
Yeah. So, estrogen levels, testosterone levels, you'll see it more as you age. Menopause is a whole new adventure that you can get to later. The joys of being a female are there's just a lot. There's a lot of great perks, but there are also a lot of endless things that cause roller coasters. Dreams are one of those things that actually happen more. They'll happen at different times in your cycle. So if you're on a birth control where you're basically controlling that cycle, you're not going to have the same roller coaster that would naturally happen. So when you let that go through a normal cycle, your temperature will change, your circadian rhythm will change slightly, your dreams and even the structure of your sleep will change throughout your cycle. All of those will happen if you're going off birth control and you're getting pregnant. You'll have crazy dreams during pregnancy. That's another one where, again, all different levels are going to happen, and different parts of pregnancy will have different dreams. So again, it's really on those levels of estrogen and testosterone that are having a big influence, again, on what you're thinking about. So it influences your sleep and your dreams very much so the same. So if it's influencing your day, it's influencing your night.
And here's the last question. And I like that this is the last one. I think I know the answer to this one, but I'm very curious as what you'll think about this. Could you speak to the impact of alcohol and its effects on sleep quality, short-term versus long-term? I would even say short-term and long-term as opposed to versus, but.
Yeah, so alcohol is a sedative. So a lot of people, pandemic levels on alcohol were phenomenal, through the roof. A lot of people were self-medicating with helping themselves to sleep or fall asleep because it's a sedative. Unfortunately, metabolizing alcohol has a significant effect on that heat signature that we've talked about. So when you drink alcohol, your body has to metabolize it. And just like working out, it's going to ramp up to do that. And it actually creates a higher heat profile. So again, if you're trying to get to that 2 degrees of core body temperature, it's not going to happen when you drink alcohol unless you can pull that off. We have a doc pro, and I talk about it all the time because Todd does like a good bourbon occasionally. And so we'll have to crank it down for him when he drinks. So it doesn't have to ruin your life. Sleep can be a huge buzzkill of going to bed and the sleep hygiene thing. But it's understanding the impact of that alcohol. Cannabis has got very similar sort of pluses and minuses. THC, again, very similar, is going to be a great sedative. It may help you relax. A lot of veterans use it to get past PTSD, or even using CBD to get past pain. If pain is keeping you awake, then it's absolutely going to be helpful. But it's also important to realize, usually within 2 weeks of using any of those kind of sedatives or relaxers to help you fall asleep, the impact is going to significantly reduce, and you're actually going to sleep less. It's so disruptive to those sleep patterns and your metabolism that the long-term effects in general are not positive. You can get short-term parts. And again, if your pain profile, I know a veteran that uses it for back pain, and compared to sleeping with the back pain versus sleeping without, he's generally better off, but he still struggles long-term to get that deep sleep, because the chemicals have lasting effect on your ability in your brain to slow down.
Does sleep medication come under that same category?
Sleep medication is probably one of my biggest pet peeves. So if you think about most of the classes of your Ambiens or your Lunestas, those drugs that are supposed to put you to sleep, they're actually a class of drug that is hallucinogen. So you're going to hallucinate that you're sleeping. You actually don't change your brain significantly. You're sedated. So just like you don't wake up from anesthesia going, wow, that was amazing, I'm so rested and relaxed. you are changing a state of consciousness, but you are not actually invoking huge sleep. Again, like the alcohol or THC or whatever that is, short-term tool. I know people that use it on an airplane because at least it settles them down to like get through, an airplane trip. Short-term tools, all of those, even melatonin is great to sort of break jet lag or get past, but you're doing hormone replacement at that point. Your body should naturally produce it. Anything you're doing long-term with a chemical is going to change how your chemicals in your body react. So you want to make sure that you're using those tools and understand that the tools are tools and use them for short-term gains or short-term problems, but it's not a 10-year solution for sleep. Unfortunately, over long-term, it causes cancer usually, is where those, if you pull up studies, long-term use of most of those sleep aids will end in sort of a cancer profile. Melatonin is not that way yet, but there's a lot of evidence that hormone replacement does stop melatonin production, again, over years of usage, not 5 days or a month.
The one thing, and then I guess we'll have to say goodbye, even though I want to talk to you for another 2 hours. Everything that you've said tonight confirms the fact that we as human beings are the source. It requires a little education. It requires a little time and energy and effort, but ultimately, and it's not the easiest thing. Like you're saying, like exercise is hard, eating, stopping smoking cigarette and drinking alcohol and all these different things. They're all hard, but they lead to this incredible life if we're willing to put in the time and the energy. And that's exactly what you've been saying about, there's so many amazing tools that you've provided for me and everybody else that's been listening in, which are these, that we are the source. We don't need the meds and the alcohol and the CBD and the da-da-da and all the tricks that give us like sort of these short-term solutions that can often lead to long-term problems, cancer, I guess, being one of them. And so, yeah, it's just a matter of whether you're curious enough and willing to try and being patient but this has been really powerful. Thank you so much. Anything you want to say to?
The last question there is absolutely one that I feel like will end it really well, but how bad is it for your body not to get enough sleep? You can go longer without food than you can without sleep. So after losing sleep and you get into that 24 hours, you hallucinate so bad, your brain actually starts to break itself down. It is a horrible thing to sleep deprive people. They do it in the military, although I am working with all aspects of the military to kind of get through fatigue science and to really look at the impact of that. And I think they're finally coming around to the fact that doing studies of ammo testing and accuracy on sleep deprivation, 4 hours of sleep or less, they can't shoot the broadside of a barn. So if you're sleep depriving a soldier and that's your tool, it's not going to work if you're tired. So it is really bad to not get enough sleep. It is going to kill you faster
than going hungry.
So keep in mind that it is worth that investment. If you just put it in that scale of, if you had to manage something, make sure you're hydrated, you get water and oxygen, but then make sure you're getting enough sleep, because the energy to eat and work out will all be better. It's definitely worth it. Not sleeping's bad.
Tara, have you done anything with the military, the Pentagon, or anything like that? Have you had any of those discussions with them?
Yeah, so I worked with Allison Breger. She's worked at Walter Reed. She's with the U.S. Army. We've done a bunch of work with the Air Force. We did a bunch of work, did a study with drone pilots with our product and sleeping. There's a study going on with the Air Force right now. We work with veterans a lot. So all of our products, if we get a return back and it's not cosmetically right, we donate all of those to veterans. We work really hard to make sure that they're getting enough sleep. Again, PTSD, depression are all tied to lack of sleep. Anyone that suffered sort of an injury or amputation, neurological diseases will all benefit from sleeping cooler and better. Just like you run a fever, the moment you don't feel well, temperature regulation is one of the first things to go wonky. So fixing that for sleep can often make a really big difference. So we have a bunch of different programs depending on the branch of the military. But again, I'll be on a panel in February with Allison Breger, really working hard to sort of define what does tired mean and what does it do. We now actually have a test for people before they go to fly a $1 billion airplane. They have to pass a fatigue test, because it turns out driving one of those suckers drunk because you're too tired, not a good idea. Waste of $1 billion, not a good idea. So yeah, they're finally really starting to come around, really measuring sleep for military people.
Wow. Well, you are doing God's work, Tara, really phenomenal. Thank you for tonight. This was, I mean, I was fired up beforehand. I'm more fired up now after our conversation. You know your stuff. It's really cool to spend 90 minutes with somebody who knows their stuff inside and out. Super educational. I'm really inspired by what you've been able to share. So thank you. And I wish everybody else was here to kind of wave and say thanks as well. But for me and everyone else who's part of Power Life and Power Nation, this will sit on our website for others to see if they couldn't be here tonight. So everybody, sleep.me. That's it. You don't have to do the www. You can sleep.me and boom, there is your stuff. There is your Chilisleep mat. And yeah, we're going to, now, are you offering, what is the Chilisleep? Like, you have king size and queen size?
Yeah, there's half a bed. We have 3 different units, one, picture them like sizing out your room for an air conditioner. So we have the basic one that doesn't have an app. You can't schedule it, not at like a programmable thermostat. It works on a remote. And it's sort of your base level that starts at $599 and goes up to whatever configurations from there. So you can sort of plan it according to what your need is. Our Dock Pro, I will say the one thing that's super cool, we launched this in September. We are the only people doing real live sleep tracking in the moment that is attached to an AI hardware called Hyber. So when you connect that to your Dock Pro, we actually are adjusting, we're reading your sleep. So in your deep sleep, we're going to cool it down slightly. We're actually analyzing that algorithm in real time. So most sleep trackers, if you've ever used one, will do a look back in the morning and you can see it spin or move across. It's analyzing your data and says, oh, you're amazing, or by the way, you sucked. And if you suck, there's really nothing you can do about it. So try again tomorrow. Yeah. But good luck with that. So this is really like when you get in bed and Hyber is on as part of your schedule, it's basically running, it's checking your sleep every minute and adjusting your schedule while you're asleep to deliver better sleep. So super fun, because that just launched in September. But again, the sleep tracker is in your bed. It's not a wearable, so you don't have to think about wearing it. It just tracks your sleep. You just put it on your bed, and then all of that's happening in the background. So temperature wise, you're managed. You don't have to think about it, which when you're tired, the last thing you want to do is think about it. So to me, that's hard.
And the ultimate goal here is to wake up feeling like $1 million ready to take on your day. And I would imagine that a lot of people who are looking in, including myself, those days are few and far between, and we just kind of muscle through it. And it's nice to know that we don't have to, based on some great new intel. Amazing.
Yeah. It's super fun. It's GPS for sleep. You may even use your GPS to go home, even though you know how to get there. Every day is different, and you want to be able to have that managed. It's here.
So great. So great. I hope this is not our last. I think, for people who weren't here, I mean, there's a lot of information and probably a couple of questions that, I didn't think of, or these folks didn't think of, that still haven't been answered. So I would love to do this again with you sometime, maybe,
absolutely,
end of the year or beginning of next year. So this has been fabulous. Sleep.me, people. All right. Get in there and make some changes. Thank you, Tara, so much. Really, really, really appreciate you. This was awesome.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. Great.
Oh, really great. Really great. Thank you. Have a great weekend. All right, everybody. Get some good sleep so you can feel awesome. If you don't, sleep.me. Let's go. Thank you, hon.
I'm glad that you've really enjoyed this interview. I can tell because you're watching it, because I can see you. Anyway, since you're here, I know you're really going to fall madly in love with this next one. I mean, I'm talking about knowledge consumed by you. All you got to do is go right over there